I know you're out there. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
The KrisAnne Hall Show.
Any varmint that crosses that lady's path has met its match. Come on!
Rise and shine, liberty-loving patriots. Welcome to the KrisAnne Hall Show. KrisAnne Hall here, KrisAnnehall.com. Liberty over security, principle over party, and truth over your favorite personality. We have got to discuss the hypocrisy of our current governments in order to really see the agenda that is going on right in front of our eyes. And I'm talking about a concerted agenda, not just simply an agenda that is by the Obama administration. I'm talking about agendas that are supported by all those who support him. And that will include the media, because we have such a fabulous example of how this is playing out, this hypocrisy, that it's like a glaring, blazing light of truth that somebody's got to talk about, because nobody in media is talking about this. I don't understand why this is such, why there's such media silence over this. The silence is deafening. I mean, when Ferguson and Baltimore were going on, it was every single day, 24 hours a day. You couldn't get away from the media reports and the live streaming news and the constant updates. But in Burns, Oregon, in Harney County, Oregon, the media silence is deafening. And I think the media silence actually indicates to us the reality of the situation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. This is a message to people who want to actually think. This is a message to people who really want to discover the truth, who want to know the truth, who want to be critical thinkers, who want to just look at this and say, wait a minute, that does not make sense. So what we have here is Governor of Oregon. Her name is Brown. Governor Brown of Oregon, Kate Brown, to be exact, has written a letter to Loretta Lynch and to the director of the FBI, which obviously should be going to Barack Obama as well, right? And so she writes this letter to Loretta Lynch and the director of the FBI, and the content of the letter is also very telling, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to point out the hypocrisy so that you can see the truth, because that's what hypocrisy does. Hypocrisy exposes truth. She says, as you are both aware, for more than 2 weeks now, these radicals have been allowed to stay unlawfully in a refuge approximately 30 miles to the south of Burns, Oregon, in Harney County. I want to point out to the fact here. These people are being called radicals. Nobody ever called the people that were burning down buildings, destroying police vehicles in Ferguson or Baltimore, nobody ever called them radicals. My goodness, when they were running down the streets with televisions, they never even called them looters. And yet these people who have threatened no one, have damaged no property, who are sitting in a building that was completely unoccupied even before they got there, these people are radicals. She continues to say, well, it's easy to assume that an occupation in such a remote location does not threaten public safety and does not harm any victims. That perception is far from accurate. Now we're arguing perceptions. When we saw the pictures of the fires, the people's private businesses in flames, when we saw the pictures of the people smashing windows and stealing property, did you ever hear anybody discussing the perception of what they were doing? It's easy to perceive that there really are not buildings burning to the ground. It's easy to perceive that there really aren't things being stolen. But that would be incorrect. What? What? We are talking about perception here. And we're talking about hypocrisy. She is arguing perception of violence, when in Ferguson and Baltimore, there was never even the discussion of violence. Are you stinking kidding me? I really just want people to think about this for just a second. Put these three situations up against each other, because it's not just a one or the other. We have a majority now. We have three situations. Two of them, violence, looting, burning, destruction. One, nothing. Nothing. And where was the demands from the governors of Missouri and Maryland to stop these lootings, this destruction? And now we have a highly publicized, highly endorsed letter from the governor of Oregon to stop nothing. She's asking the federal government to come in and immediately stop nothing. Nothing is happening. As she says in her letter, these criminals on the refuge are allowed to travel on and off the premises with little fear of law enforcement contact or interaction. Do you see this hypocrisy? These men and women have been charged with no crimes. They have committed no violence. They have damaged no property. And she is classifying them as criminals. And yet, we couldn't even call those people in Maryland and Missouri looters. They were protesters. They were burning buildings to the ground and stealing people's stuff. And they were protesters. These people are sitting in a building, and they are called criminals, who have been charged with no crimes, by the way. I challenge Governor Brown to call them criminals when they have been charged with no crime. I'm sorry, Governor Brown. There's this funny thing in the country called due process. And if you're not aware, it's covered in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments in the Bill of Rights. This funny thing called due process. and your classifications of them as criminals, as a government official, without any due process whatsoever, well, that could be perceived as a violation of their civil rights. It's amazing to me the way she continues in this letter. She says the residents of Harney County are being intimidated in their own hometown by armed criminals who appear to be seeking occasions for confrontation. Really? Now that is a flat out lie. It's a flat out lie. I spent 3 days in Burns, Oregon. I spent 3 days in Harney County, Oregon. Never such a thing ever happened. As a matter of fact, what I did see is exactly what she said. I saw the people coming and going from the refuge. I saw them eating in restaurants. I saw them speaking to law enforcement in peaceful manners. And I heard the testimony of a man who personally confronted FBI agents pretending to be, just using her words, these radicals. We had FBI agents pretending to be part of this protest who were trying to look like they were disrupting the community. The former fire marshal confronted people that he thought may have been these people that Governor Brown is warning us about. He pulled them over as they were loitering and looking like they were about to start trouble in a building. And when he pulled them over, he found out they were not involved with the refuge. They were actually FBI agents trying to provoke people to think otherwise. The fire marshal immediately resigned because he was so disgusted by what his own government was doing to his own people.
KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
I challenge anybody in media to bring this truth. I challenge them to cover this the way they covered Baltimore and Ferguson. I think part of the reason why you're not seeing the 24/7 media coverage of this is because there's absolutely nothing to see. The fact that the media is not covering this proves that what Governor Brown is saying is absolutely false, because there is a truth in media. The truth in media is, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's violent, you will see it, because that's what gets ratings. And they are not covering anything in Burns because there is nothing to see. I mean, this statement that they are being intimidated in their own town by armed criminals in confrontation is a flat-out lie. She even says supporters of these individuals have joined, staying in local motels in the city of Burns. Yeah. So what you're telling me, Governor Brown, is that the community is actually profiting over this protest. Once again, the hypocrisy is alarming. Absolutely alarming. They're not burning the hotels to the ground like they did in Ferguson. They're not burning the businesses to the ground like they are, and stomping on police cars like they did in Baltimore. No. They're improving the economy. The restaurants are getting more business than they've ever had at this time of the year. The hotels are full. It is hard to find a vacant hotel room in Burns, Oregon. And yet, we have to have this ridiculously panicked letter full of hyperbole demanding that the federal government stop nothing. You know what's ironic? That if Governor Brown would just simply ignore what's going on at the refuge, if the FBI would just simply ignore what's going on at the refuge, there would be nothing to talk about. Because you see, the only real scary occupation that is happening is that by the federal government. It's the federal government that is intimidating the people, not the people at the refuge. It's the federal government that's looting from the people because they're ringing up a huge string of charges against the taxpayers' dollars for nothing. It's the FBI who has put up fence and barricades around the courthouse to make people afraid. It's the FBI who has occupied parts of the local hospital, demanding that medevac helicopters be immediately available and asking the doctors to do emergency collection of blood. It's the federal government that's intimidating the people and making them be scared. You don't have this from the people at the refuge. She says the harm being done to the innocent men, women, and children in Harney County is real and manifest. With each passing day, tensions increase exponentially. Tensions from what? From the FBI occupation, not from the refuge. We're talking about perceptions of tensions. And the tensions are coming from the federal government. And from the efforts the federal government are taking to make the people scared. Because if the FBI were not there, the people wouldn't even know there was anyone at the refuge. This is blatant hypocrisy, which is shining a great light on the federal government agenda. You see, they don't want anybody to know that they are unlawfully occupying federal land.
So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There's light on the other side. You'll see all the raindrops falling. It's a revolution.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
So here's the question. Why isn't it that anyone is talking about this? I find it very, very disturbing, considering I actually experienced the reality of Burns. I was one of those that they perceived to be a supporter. I was one of those that because I came to teach the people of Burns about their inalienable rights, and the unauthorized occupation of federal land, of their land by the federal government. Governor Brown even calls it federal land. Because this occupation has occurred on federal land. No, ma'am. It has occurred on your land. On the land that belongs to the people of Harney County. And it's about time you start speaking truth. When? When are we going to start calling them out for their lies? When? When are we going to start exposing the real agenda here? Ferguson, buildings in rubble, televisions, properties stolen. Police literally threatened, jumping up and down on cars, destroying vehicles. Baltimore, burning buildings. Police vehicles being stomped on, windows broken, things stolen. And the media continually called them protesters. Refused to call them looters. And now we have some men and women actually peacefully occupying a building paid for with their tax dollars. It's not a private business. They're not preventing anybody from having a livelihood, and they're not burning any buildings to the ground, and they have yet to actually threaten any police officers, and they have destroyed no property whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they're improving the economics of the community. And these people are called criminals, radicals, and terrorists. I'm going to tell you from first-hand account. The only terror in Burns, Oregon, the only terror in Harney County, Oregon, is coming from the federal agents. And this is the truth. Governor Brown says, I must insist on a swift resolution in this matter. Efforts to negotiate have not been successful. What efforts to negotiate? What efforts? I will tell you, as a matter of fact, as a matter of first-hand, from me experience, it is the federal government is refusing to negotiate. The people from the refugees have gone to the FBI to speak to them. I mean, that's proven. We have video of that. Go on YouTube. You can see the people of the refuge peacefully going to the FBI and try to speak to them. You can see them standing around laughing and joking and just speaking to each other in a civilized manner. Quite different than what we experienced from the media in Ferguson and Baltimore. We have Ammon Bundy reaching out to the government to speak. And it's the government that shut them down, not the other way around. She says, and now it is unclear what steps, if any, the federal authorities might take to bring this untenable situation to an end and restore normalcy to this community. Normalcy? Normalcy. The only thing that's not normal in Burns is the FBI barricade of the courthouse, and the FBI seizing hospital rooms, and the FBI walking through Burns like it's some kind of war zone. That's the only thing that is not normal in Burns. Except for the fact that, of course, the restaurants have more business and the hotels have more business. Maybe that's what Governor Brown is hoping for. The normalcy that these people are going to be bankrupted because the federal government has occupied their land and stolen their resources. Maybe that's the normalcy that Governor Brown is talking about. She wants the federal government to have to get back control of this land, so her people will be bankrupt and destitute and demand more federal money, so now she can get even richer from her beloved federal administration. Maybe that's the normal she's talking about. I'm just talking about the hypocrisy here. I'm talking about the fact that the governor of Missouri, Jay Nixon, told the National Guard of Missouri to stand down as the city burned in riots. The city is burning to the ground. People's businesses, personal, private businesses are being destroyed. People actually are in fear. And Governor Jay Nixon told the National Guard to stand down and watch it happen. Do you know what the lieutenant governor said about that? He said, is the reason that the National Guard was not in there because the Obama administration and the whole their Justice Department leaned on you to keep them out? The lieutenant governor says, I cannot imagine any other reason why the governor would mobilize the National Guard, would not have them in there to stop this. Actual destruction, actual violence, actual terrorism. And the Obama administration, by the lieutenant governor. Lieutenant governor is saying the Obama administration told them to stand down. I mean, really. The buildings are burning to the ground, and Eric Holder is chastising the governor of Missouri for declaring a state of emergency. Seriously? A snowflake falls with the forecast of a storm, and then before the storm even hits, governors are calling states of emergency. And buildings are burning to the ground, and Holder is chastising the governor of Missouri for calling a state of emergency. I'm trying to show you the hypocrisy here. Nothing is happening in Burns. I was there for 3 solid days. I can tell you that everything seems normal. I ate at restaurants. I drove through the towns. I watched the people. I experienced their life for 3 days. It looked pretty normal to me. Until you got to the courthouse where the FBI was, or until you saw the FBI vehicles and their armed paratroopers running through the town. Really. See, the federal government has a very, very funny definition of peaceful protester. And a very, very funny definition of criminal. Eric Holder is mad at the governor of Missouri for declaring martial law because he says, well, these protesters have not been indicted by a grand jury. So we can't say anything about that yet. Right? Well, the protesters were never indicted with anything. They were never charged with a crime. And yet, here we are. They are peaceful protesters in Ferguson and Baltimore. And the people sleeping in a refuge, an empty building, are criminals terrorists, and need to be immediately stopped by the federal government. She says, restore this situation immediately and restore normalcy to this community. She says, I request on behalf of my fellow Oregonians that you instruct your agencies to end the unlawful occupation of the National Wildlife Refuge as safely and quickly as possible. I want you to look at the way the FBI is trying to end this safely and quickly. I want you to think about their response. Is their response to sit down at the table in a neutral place and engage in intelligent discussion and negotiation? Is that their response? No. Their response is to bring in force, to bring in armed troops, to bring in threat. There's no desire for the federal government to have a peaceful resolution. They want to make an example.
My right to tote the weapon of my choice. Don't censor my voice. Hate me if you won't, or love me if you can. If the truth is what you want, then you found your man. I ain't backing down, I ain't backing up. If you think like I think, then crank it on up. I won't back up, I don't back down. I've been raised up to stand my ground. Take my job, but not my guns. Tax my check till I ain't got none. Except for the good Lord up above. I answer to no one.
The KrisAnne Hall Show. She's Liberty's lobbyist.
You know what's ironic is that I have never seen a better example of history repeating itself today. I mean, you know I teach the history. And when I teach the 700 years of the Constitution, you see history repeating very precisely. But let me tell you something. What Governor Brown is doing is mirroring Governor Thomas Gage in Boston. Absolutely mirroring Governor Thomas Gage in Boston. It's uncanny what is going on here. And I wish that Governor Brown would study out the history of Governor Thomas Gage and see that that's not a legacy she wants. I believe she thinks that by throwing this off on the federal government, she will somehow, in history, be exonerated. That she will have no responsibility for what will happen in this situation. Oh, it's not my fault. It's the federal land. It's not my fault. It's the federal government's. And I'm sorry. Thomas Gage tried that too. And history does not report that to be a favorable response on Gage. I also want to read to you something from Patrick Henry. This is from his Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. And I want you to hear Henry's words and then think about Burns, Oregon. I want you to think about the people in the refuge who have burned no buildings, who have damaged no property, who have stolen no goods, have physically threatened no one. And then think about the reaction of the federal government. Think about the fact that the people of the refuge have gone out of their way to speak to the FBI and the federal government for resolution. And the federal government responds how? This is what Patrick Henry said about the British government's reaction to their protests. He says, I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that's the lamp of experience. I know no way of judging the future but by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what there has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify those hopes with which gentlemen have pleased to solace themselves. And the House. Is it that insidious smile with which our petition has been lately received? Trust it not, sir. It will prove a snare to your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our land. Are fleets and armies necessary to the work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves, sir. These are implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. I ask, gentlemen, sir, what means this martial array? If its purpose be not to force us to submission, can gentlemen assign any other possible motive for it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of forces? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains which the British ministry has so long been forging. Think about that. The FBI showing up like they're trying to battle Al-Qaeda or ISIS. There is no Al-Qaeda or ISIS in Burns. Just American citizens concerned about an unlawful occupation by the federal government and a federal government out of control. Look at the hypocrisy. It tells you everything you need to know. Look at the silence. It speaks louder. God bless. See you tomorrow.